My name is Karen Disbrow, and I am introducing myself as the speaker this evening. Welcome everybody to our last meeting of the spring. We are hoping to get the Environmental Learning Center for our fall meetings. We still have to set that up, but we're hoping to have a September, October, November here and do a hybrid again of Zoom and in person. So, I'm going to talk about the Sandhill Cranes tonight. I've been enchanted with the Sandhill Cranes since I first spotted them in 91 or 92 when I was leaving Cone Marsh and driving up from the causeway out back towards the highway. And I looked up and there was these two birds flying, and I thought at first they were egrets. And then I looked again and I go, oh my God, that's Sandhill Cranes. So I've just been enchanted with them. So that was in the early 90s. So I joined the Bird Club in 1988. And one of my first trips was to Cone Marsh. And I saw a lot of things there that day, that spring day, but I didn't see any Sandhill Cranes in 88. I also started going to the IOU meetings, and I met a lot of people, and somehow I hooked up with some DNR people. And in 1994, they told me that there was 2 pair of Sandhill Cranes nesting at Otter Creek Marsh. So in 1994, I grabbed Mary Noble and maybe another friend of hers, and we went over to Otter Creek Marsh. They had, that was the time when they had that red barn, and they had a driving path that they blocked off because back behind that barn was where the Sandhill Cranes were nesting. So you could only see them when they were flying out to the cornfields in the morning or at evening. They'd come back in. And so we got to see those 2 pair of Sandhill Cranes that day in March in 1994. So I've got some facts because somebody wanted the life history of Sandhill Cranes. So the male is larger than the female. The Sandhill Cranes in the wild can live up to 35 years, which is a long time for a bird in the wild. And they are monogamous. So if a pair loses, one of the male or the female is lost or dies, then during the spring migration in March and in February out in Nebraska, that's when they gather up in a big group and they start meeting each other. And so singles start pairing up again. The oldest record of Sandhill Cranes in the fossil record is 2.5 million years ago. And I've always considered them a Pleistocene bird. I'm not sure if that's quite right, if 2.5 million years ago is old enough to be Pleistocene, but the sound they make is definitely, I think, prehistoric. You guys hear that? Okay. That was an antiphonal flight call. And then they have rattle calls. Excellent. So then they have unison calls for a pair. Forage for grains and invertebrates and bugs, and they'll eat frogs and that type of thing. So, all right, okay, so here's a nest, and you can see a little baby crane on top of its mother or father, whoever's on the nest at this point. They lay 2 eggs generally, and the eggs are 3.6 inches long and 2.3 inches wide for the greater. And they lay these eggs in late April to early May. And it takes 32 days for them to hatch. And then the young will stay with the parents for the next 9 to 10 months. And then when they migrate, the young will go with the parents. The youngs are called colts. And at Cone Marsh, they had a tendency to love to put nest material on top of muskrat homes. And so in past years, we've seen as many as 6 sandhill crane nests actually on Cone Marsh. In previous years, they have nested off of the Cone Marsh property past that oxbow that's down at the causeway. But you can see they have pretty good size eggs. So they have this red patch along their eyes and then a white cheek, and they are kind of a grayish color. Now I've seen them when they are nesting, when they look to be pretty rusty brown. And so they do have a rusty brown to their feathers, but I sometimes wonder if they don't pick up dust from the surrounding soil so that they kind of blend in more. One of the things that I found fascinating in 2016, I went to, I think we went to Kearney, and we went to the Rao Audubon Center to see the Sandhill Cranes. We went the last week in March. And by that time, by 2016, I'd been spotting the Sandhill Cranes at Cone Marsh for, I don't know, 20 years. And I was shocked at how short the Sandhill Cranes were in Nebraska. And so that's when I started gathering up information and finding out more about the Sandhill Cranes. So the greater Sandhill Crane is the one we have here in the eastern part of Iowa. The lesser Sandhill Crane is the one that's in Nebraska. And they will go down to Arizona and Mexico for their winter rounds, and then come up to Nebraska, and then go. The lesser traditionally have nested in the Arctic, but I'm not sure they're going that far now. Today, Doug Haar, retired wildlife diversity DNR wildlife biologist, president of the Iowa Audubon, told me that the DNR has found 4 pairs nesting in Northwest Iowa. He couldn't remember the counties they were found in. They like to nest in marshy areas and like Cone Marsh, or on dry ground that's maybe just a little ways away. So, so I found that fascinating. So I bought a book when I was down there. And of course, you know, I moved, so I can't find anything. So Paul A. John, this guy, has a great book. He wrote one in 2008 or 9, and this is his 2011 one. And he's been fascinated with them for 30 or 40 years. So I found out that there are 6 subspecies. So there are the greater Sandhill Cranes, which we have about 40,000 in the country. There's the lesser. I think they have the largest population, and I would probably put them around 50,000. We have a Canadian contingent. We have a Florida contingent. We have a Mississippi contingent, and we have some Cuban Sandhill Cranes. So the Florida Sandhill Cranes are confined to Florida. There's about 19,400 in 2011 that he recorded. And they are non-migratory. They just stay there. And I saw them when I was visiting my sister in 2016 and 2017. And they were, just like ours, the greater Sandhill Cranes. The Mississippi group, there's only about 130 members of that. And they are also non-migratory. And they actually have a national wildlife refuge for them. That's, I think, about 12,000 acres. And they're trying to build up their numbers. Okay. And they are also a remnant of the greater Sandhill Cranes. The Cuban is a endangered and also evolved from the eastern flyway of the graders. And there are, in 2011, there was 550 to 650 in Cuba, but they stayed in Cuba. So the Canadian ones, they are an intermediate, okay? And the Florida ones are intermediate. They are pretty tall, but they're intermediate too. So we have the lesser, which are 43 inches tall. To me, they only look like they were about 38 or 40 inches, but and then the greater, which is 46 inches tall. The greater has a wingspan of 77 inches and it weighs 10.6 pounds on average. The lesser is 41 inches tall, has a wingspan of 73 inches and only weighs 7.3. The Florida are intermediate. The Cuban and the Mississippi, I think, have a tendency to be more of the greater. They may be a little shorter. So we have a Rocky Mountain flyway, we have a Pacific flyway, and of course we have the Mississippi flyway. The Canadians are about 90% of the size of the graders. So they're not quite as tall and big. And they range from British Columbia over to Ontario. The Rocky Mountain ones stay in Utah and Idaho. And I think they come up through Arizona. And then the ones that come up along the Pacific flyway, they kind of go towards the California coast and they go up to Oregon. And that's where they nest, up in Oregon and Washington. So, does anybody have any questions? Okay.
You have to unmute yourselves if you want, if you have questions.
Okay, well, this is from Eric, right? Eric, and he wanted to know where ours migrate from. Ours go along the Gulf Coast and can be seen down in Texas and Louisiana. And they don't go all the way to New Mexico, I don't think. I went to the Apache de la Bosque in 2001 in November for their Sandhill Crane Festival, and the Sandhill Cranes didn't show up. So I think, I kind of thought at the time that they got the lesser, and the lesser went from New Mexico and Arizona on up to Nebraska. And then the Nebraska ones, being the lesser, were supposed to continue on to the Arctic. And so you might see them in Ontario or some of the others. But they say that the Canadian contingent is a little different than the lesser. So have I thoroughly confused everybody? That was one of the things I wanted to do, was thoroughly confuse you. So you're supposed to laugh. Anyway, I think the Sandhill Cranes are amazing birds. And the fact that they're still around after 2.5 million years is amazing to me. So let's see if I can show you. I wanted to show you a dance. So we'll see if I can get that done. Can you guys see that pretty good?
Yep.
They're amazing when they do their dancing. Now, this spring, I went up to Round Pond, and for 2 weeks, there was about 20 Sandhill Cranes up there, and they were 3 or 4 of them would be down dancing. Round Pond, the big pond itself was dry, but there was a little pond kind of to the north, to the north, and that's where the sandhills were hanging out with some other ducks. And they seem to be pairing up. Yesterday, I went down to Cone Marsh to see if I could report on any sandhill crane nests. But there weren't any. The water is high. This past spring, I saw, I think, 30 muskrat homes scattered around. I'm sure you all saw them when you went out in February and March. They're all gone. I saw one muskrat home that had about 4 inches showing with nothing on top of it. I saw 5 Canadian geese, one pair that had one single chick that was about 24 hours old. The other 3 were at the far end of Long Pond, where there's that parking area to put in boats, you know, down by the causeway. And they were just 3 single Canadian geese. There were no other birds on the water. I got a shorebird that I haven't been able to identify at the wooded area where there's a boat ramp. And I got all kinds of woodland birds, you know, the grosbeak and cardinals and blue jays. And I even got a nighthawk, a common nighthawk was calling. I was there about 2:30 in the afternoon. So they sometimes start flying about 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, fly catching. I didn't even see any tree swallows till I got pretty far away from Cone Marsh. And so I'm wondering if the water didn't come up so fast that the geese lost their nests. I don't know what anybody else might think, but that's possible. On the spring count, we did Kent Park group, and all the ponds were empty. The one little pond behind the CEC Center had 2 Canada geese on it, but no little ones. And we went through the campground, and it has a little pond, and that had a Canadian pair that had about 8 to 10 babies with them that were, you know, kind of getting towards the grayish stage. So they were getting closer to 2 weeks old. So so I just don't know what everybody else has been seeing, but I'm wondering if the water just didn't come up so high that some of these birds, you know, might have to re-nest or find a different place or something. Now, the Sandhill Cranes, they like to come back to the same area year after year. So I don't know where they went since they're no longer on the marsh, because last year I think there was 6 pairs on the Cone Marsh itself on muskrat homes. Does anybody else remember anything different? Okay. All right. So if you have not been to Kearney, Nebraska, it's a 5 or 6 hour trip. You know, the rooms are cheap. Go in the middle of the week, go on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Weekends are always a lot. But not only can you see the Sandhill Cranes, which is amazing, and you do not have to get up at 3 a.m. to go out and sit in the blind. You can get up at 5:30 and go out to the Platte River, and they'll all be on the Platte River, and you can see a bunch of them go up at once. And there's several viewing places. And they go to the cornfields. So you can just drive around the gravel roads and get really good looks of the Sandhill Cranes. They also have the greater chicken, prairie chicken. And they have Lex there, but you have to kind of sign up and go with somebody to actually find. I tried to find it by myself when we were out there with friends of mine, and we couldn't really locate them. So you really kind of have to sign up. And I think maybe they have a grouse out there too that you might be able to see. But it's well worth the trip. It should be on everybody's bucket list. There's just nothing like it to see them all go up at once. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, and
Yeah.
if we don't have questions, I must stop recording.
No, I have one more question here.
Oh, okay.
Are our Sandhill Cranes are they tagged at all and monitored as they go? I've never noticed tags on these. In this book, he talks about electronic monitoring and telemarketing, where they put on those satellite things so they can track them for different populations. So they have been doing work with them, but I don't think they're doing that with our particular population right here. Now, I don't know at Otter Creek Marsh, where they've been nesting since 1992, some of those might be tagged, you know. Last spring, in 2023, when we went there was 40 Sandhill Cranes. When you were going from the causeway headed north, and you could see the gravel road, and it went up a hill, and there was kind of a lee, area. And there was 40 Sandhill Cranes standing there, in March of 2023. So they're here, and hopefully they found a safe place to have their babies and raise them, and they haven't been flooded out. But I don't think they even attempted to nest at Cone Marsh this year, because the different times I've been down there, I've heard maybe one call, and I've never seen any on the muskrat homes. But then we got all this rain all at once, Ledges State Park, the lower road in Ledges State Park is closed. They got 6 inches of rain between May 1st and May 7th. So they're flooded out for the lower part of Ledges State Park. So I guess, you can stop recording. Probably that's all I got to say.